I just wanted to give a quick tour of my basement hydroponic garden. This past summer, I decided to change up how we'd been doing our hydroponic systems and try a new system. So I made this all with 4-inch PVC pipe, and it hangs from the studs up here. And yeah, so far it's been really good. Here's a look at sort of how this is all put together. I wanted a system in the basement rather than out in a greenhouse or something, because then I can get to it easier and it stays winterproofed. I don't have to build a winterproof shelter or anything. So the trick for me was, how do you grow things in the basement and use your space efficiently? And you can see I've got quite a mess down below because I've been trimming and cleaning some things up. It drains into my reservoir, which is really just a big garbage bin. Now this one is the HDPE, so it's like food grade, so you don't have as much contamination in your water. And then inside, there's just a pump. It's just a cheap pump. Ooh, and there it's turned on. So it turns on, I have it set to turn on every 15 minutes and then shut off for another 15 minutes. And what it does is it shoots the water in up here at the top of the system. And all it does is just, that water just uses gravity to flow all the way back down to the outlet, and it just drains back in here. This is a very simple system. There's 4-inch PVC pipe that runs, there's 4 rows of it. So 4 total PVC 4-inch pipes that are 10 feet long each. And they hang from the ceiling via 2x4s that are connected to the studs. Each stud has these J-hooks that hook onto your PVC pipe, and these are adjustable, so I just kind of have them lightly screwed in case I needed to adjust the pitch at all. So the way I have this set up, there are 4 2x4s that hold up the whole system here, and the first one starts way over here at the pump. So this 2x4 right here is going to be the shortest 2x4 out of all of the 8. And then they are 3 inches longer as you go. So this 2x4 is number 1. This 2x4 over here is number 2. And this would be 3 inches longer than number 1 over there. And then this one is 3 inches longer than this one. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 down there, then 5, 6, 7, and then 8 all the way on the other side over there. And each one is 3 inches longer than the other across this 10-foot space. So what that does is it gives you a nice flow where it's not too steep and it's not too flat where the water really pools up a lot and you get clogs and leaks and things like that. So I do have some video of us cleaning out this the tomatoes, and they show how big the root systems get and how much water can really fill up and clog up in these pipes. more tomatoes. No more tomatoes. All strawberries. And then we're just letting these peppers finish out over here. On the corners, I have these flexible 90-degree elbows. And I use flexible pipe and not glue because you never really know, especially for me, I was experimenting with hydroponics setups. I had all kinds of them. And when I built this one, I wasn't sure if it was going to work or not. So I wanted these flexible pipes that just have these clamps that you can unscrew, and then it all pulls off, and this whole thing can be disassembled and taken out of here. If you use the glue with the PVC glue, it's a fixed thing. You can't get it apart again, and so you're locked in that way. These rubber elbows are the way to go if you don't want any leaks. I would mention that right now I only have like a 3-inch stub PVC pipe here joining these two elbows together. You could probably make a longer one, and I may experiment with that at some point in the future to get these rows a little bit further apart. And the main reason is it allows you to like work inside easier, so you can kind of come up through the middle and tend to your plants and things like that. Right now they're a little too close together. The downside of making them wider is your lighting situation. So I have these 3-foot long rectangles that, actually they're 4 feet long, I believe, that cover a 3-foot by 5-foot rectangle. So come around here, and I spaced so down here, the shiny part is my first PVC, second, third, fourth. All 4 of them, I tried to get as close as I could to about 3 feet. And then I hung the lights in the middle of the 2 middle ones here, because for this particular light, the ideal footprint of the plants growing underneath it is going to be like a 3x5 space. This whole thing is about 10 feet long. Because these PVC pipes are just the 10-foot long ones you can buy at a big box store right off the shelf. And I didn't want to do much cutting or anything like that, so I just left them. So 2 of these rectangles next to each other cover a nice 10-foot space that has a 3-foot width. So if you do make it wider, you will have to think about what kind of lights you want. And you may want to switch over to these big squares because they have a much wider footprint, at least from, in my situation, from the back of it to the front, they would be able to cast a wider light, but then you might need 3 side by side to cover this whole 10-foot space. So I thought this would be the most efficient way to do this and use the least amount of electricity. Another thing I want to point out is up here above, I've just got 1.5-inch PVC pipe. And what I can do is I can use strings to trellis any plants I need to, and I was doing that with the tomatoes. I've also seen recommendations just let your tomatoes hang over, which I think makes a lot more sense than to have them grow up in a hydroponic system, because you don't have a lot of space for them. And my tomato plants are everywhere up on the ceiling here. So if I were to do this all over again, so each one of these pipes is 120 inches long. They're 10-foot long pipes. I put a hole every 6 inches. That allows me to do 80 plants on here. So there's 4 total pipes with 20 holes. That's 80 holes total. I think what I would do is just reduce the number of holes, because the chances of having 80 plants in here is very slim. I would probably increase the spacing to 8 to 10 inches instead of 6. And the reason why is you start to get a lot of competition for space, and the lettuce plants will overtop each other, and that's okay, because what I do is I'll alternate when I'm harvesting. So as I cut one down, it frees up the other one to kind of grow over top, and then as I cut that one down, the other one's already starting to grow back over top. So one other tip, the white PVC pipe that you use can let in light from your grow lights. Wrapping the mylar around the pipe, one, reflects more light back up to the plants, but also it keeps more light out of your water and your reservoir. And that way you don't have as much algae buildup in the system. So this system is actually pretty nice and dark, and I don't really get any algae building up in my system here, and this has been running for several months. So some things you'll want to think about when you're planning your height is, one, how much space you have in your basement to hang lights, because that's the other factor here, is how close these lights get to the plants. And if the plants get too close to the light, they can get the sunburn on their leaves. I don't really care about these tomatoes. I'm tempted to just cut them all out of here. But for things like lettuce, they don't get super tall. I'm playing around with these tall ones here to see if I can get some seeds out of them. But your highest pipe here will be really close to the lights. This is all an art of where you position your lights and then how you rotate your plants around. Because when they're little, they are farther away from the light. Then as they start to grow, they get closer and closer to the light source. And so you either need to dim the lights or move them down to the lower pipes so don't get too close to these lights and suffer burn. That noise you hear is this mylar sheeting. You can buy a big roll of it on Amazon, and it's pretty cheap. But I hung this all the way around the whole enclosure to just help reflect light. I have some old mirrors that we don't use anymore that I've just put on the floor, and it helps reflect light back up. So I'm just trying to make as efficient use of the light as possible. I'll show you how easy it is to move things around. Just pull these cups out. I only have these cups in here really to just block more of the light from getting into the tubes. And so here we go. I'll just grab this guy. Make sure we don't damage the roots or anything. Do this and this. This one right here. Yeah, it's that easy to relocate. One of the biggest expenses of running or growing your own plants indoors and with a hydroponic system is the fertilizer solution that you're going to use inside your reservoir. So this is what I use. This is not sponsored at all. I just have tested out different kinds. And so it's called pH Perfect Bloom, and it's a 3-part system. So they call it Bloom, Micro, Grow. And you mix these together in equal quantities, and then you pour that whole mixture in. And the instructions on the side tell you, how much to use per liter of water that you have, and kind of a guide for how many plants and what size plants they are. So you can follow those directions. This is pretty easy for me because all I really do is I use about 150 milliliters of each one. Pour it into one of these measuring cups. It works out to 450 milliliters. And then I just take that and I dump it right into my reservoir after I fill it up. And that's all I do. So if you're like me, you have a lot of stuff going on and you don't want to spend forever in your basement tending to plants. I enjoy this, but I really do it so I can have fresh vegetables and things like that through the winter. And in Wisconsin, it's hard to get good stuff at the store that's really fresh. The best thing that we do is we eat salads. So lettuce that you can just cut directly from your garden in your basement in the wintertime and make a salad like right upstairs is pretty awesome. I keep it as simple as I can, and I know if there's a lot of green thumbs out there that do this professionally might cringe at some of the things I'm doing here, but it works for me. It's very efficient. I spend very little time, probably about a half an hour a week. The most expensive components are going to be your fertilizer solution and your lighting. So the cost of the lights themselves and then the cost of the electricity to run the lights. Currently I have 3 lights set up, and I can post links to these, but I've used these metal topped lights. They're all LEDs, and I'll put a link to them. I've tried several different kinds. There's tons of these type on Amazon where they're like, you know, the names change with every, it's like the same light, but there's a million different names used. So these work okay. I actually use these little lights to start my seedlings. So far, the most intensive plant has been tomatoes, and each week I'll cut out about this much, a pile of tomatoes, vines and things to clean them up. I cut out about that much, and this has been by far the most amount of work that I've had to do. Lettuce, the only time you're really cutting is when you're eating it. I think it's probably best to just buy your tomatoes at a store if you can. One other thing to point out are timers. You will want timers. Timers for your lights and timers for your pumps. So my pumps are set on this drip system here to just, like I said, go every 15 minutes, alternating. And so the pump turns on and off every 15 minutes. The lights I have mimic sunlight. So I do typically a 12 to 16 hour cycle. So of lights on, and then, you know, the difference lights off. So 12 to 8 hours of darkness. And that's important for the plants. But I found that, like with lettuce, it's really not picky, and in fact it'll grow really fast with the 16 hours of light and 8 hours of dark. Another thing to think about if you're doing basement growing, what are you going to do for your water source? And so we are fortunate enough to have and we live out in the country, so we have well water, and well water it's not chlorinated or anything like that if you're on city water. So this is a hose that comes from a spigot in my basement, and I'm able to refill my reservoir. And then down here, this is the sump pump. So I just let anything I need to drain or whatever, I pour it down in the sump pump, and that pumps it out. It keeps the sump pump in operating condition because you're constantly using it. And I find that helpful because then I know it's working, and if anything goes wrong with it, I find out about it before there's an actual storm or something where I need to actually worry about the sump. With well water, I've noticed that our water around here is fairly basic. So you need to add some acidity to it to bring the pH in balance for the plants you're going to grow. And for lettuce, it's very tolerant, so it doesn't matter too much. Okay, so I just filled up my reservoir for my hydroponic system, and now I have taken a little sample vial of the water in the reservoir. I'm going to do a pH test to see where I'm at on my pH scale. This is not sponsored, just what I use. You take this little dropper here, suck out some of this, you put about 3 to 5 drops into here, and then you shake it around and you see what color you come up with. Now, strawberries need to be around 5.5, at least this is what I've read. And so it's gonna be between this like orange and real light green color. I'm gonna do a test to show sort of what my water is when I just fill up a reservoir. So this will kind of give you an idea of how basic my water is. So let's just go ahead and check to see how this tests out. So I just suck up some of this pH test liquid, and using this little eyedropper here, you only need about 3 to 5 decent sized drops. I'll just do 4. Put the cap on this vial, just kind of shake it around, and then see what we got. And I'm not sure if you can really see that, but it's pretty blue. We're at like an 8.5. I definitely need to add some acid to my reservoir to get the pH balance down, because I'm looking for like that light green color or even a little orangey for the strawberries to grow well. Here's the stuff that came with my pH test kit. I've also got a gallon jug of this. You don't need a whole lot of it for a big reservoir, about a 40-gallon reservoir. I would say it probably only needs a couple ounces. I'm gonna do 2 ounces of this stuff. Be very careful, probably should wear gloves when handling this. Before you do your final pH test, always add your nutrients to your reservoir and then do your pH balance. So let's go ahead and get these in here. And I use this 3-part system. And typically I put 150 milliliters of each one in this measuring cup here. All right. So all in all, 450 milliliters that I'm putting into about 40 gallons here. So we just take this, pour it in. I'm just gonna kind of stir it around. I've already poured the acid in here, the pH down. And it's had a little bit of a chance to mix around. So let me get my vial. Okay, so take a vial here. Put our dropper in, pH test stuff. So I brought this out into the light so you can see a little better. This is kind of a pale green, so I'm probably right around the 6 pH level. So I might just add about a ½ an ounce more of the pH down in here, and I think we'll be good to go. And my reservoir here should last with just the strawberries, and when I get all these tomatoes out of here, I'm guessing my reservoir tank will last me a good week or two before I need to add more water and more nutrients to it. So here's something that didn't work very well. I tried to use these hanging vertical grow tubes, and what I found with these, they really should be used outside. They don't work very well in a basement space, and the reason why is because they're vertical. It's really hard to get light on them evenly around here. The other thing is you can see there's lots of mess and spilling and dripping that's going over the outside and spray everywhere on the floor. So they make quite a mess, and you're constantly refilling the reservoir underneath. Because I could never get it to flow right. I think I probably had too much flow in my pump. But the other thing is they just seem to let a lot of light in with this white PVC. And I was having trouble with algae buildup. And so you can see the remnants of when I was using this. I was testing this out, and it's definitely not worth the hassle. So I would highly recommend the horizontal system that I was showing in a basement. I hope you enjoyed. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so if you find it compelling enough, and talk to you next time.